Welcome to Connected Conversations. My name is Praise Azi, and here we have insightful discussions across very topical issues. Today is no different. We're going to be talking about a very important topic, and we have someone here who's going to do justice to that topic. So just keep it locked in and follow us to the very end. What's our topic today? Innovation, technology, the Nigerian youth. How can we domicile technological progress right here instead of depending on the Western world for our technological solutions? And today, I have someone who's going to do justice to this topic. Doctor, tell us your name and what you're here for.
Okay, hello. My name is Augustine Okere. I work with Connected Development, and it's glad to be here.
Our doctor in the house. Great. So we're going to get straight into it. What do you think is the reason why we as Africa, when I say we, I refer to Nigerians, I refer to Africans, why do we so much depend on the Western world for our technological solutions in whatever form it is?
So when we start having conversations, I was trying to pinpoint it from that direction of our dependency on the Western world. We have to look at it from both historical standpoint and look at it also from the gap standpoint.
Historical standpoint and the gap standpoint. I like that.
So for historical standpoint, you start pinpointing as a result of how the technological innovations are coming up and mostly how it's centered around the Western world. But it's not nice most times to think that technology innovations are devoid in Africa. Okay. Africans on their own have their own technological advancement, but it might not be at par or it might not be at the same levels with which the Western world is. So that's what I mean when I talk about looking at it from the historical standpoint. And once you look at it from this dimension, you tend to appreciate the positioning Africa is vis-a-vis the Western world. And the second aspect which I talked about was with regards to the gap. So when you're looking about it from the gap perspective, unfortunately, Africa has been playing catch-up with some other parts of the world, particularly the Western world, developed countries, with regards to technological innovations and being at par. And the reasons for this is not Africa's own doing mostly. It's a result of exigencies, a lot of other factors, infrastructure, finance, because technology is actually a capital-intensive project. So when you have that perspective, you look at it also that Africa has to contribute, or Africa needs to catch up. And catching up requires a lot of financial commitment, a lot of skill sets, and a lot of other exigencies that move into it. So when you have pinpointing these areas, particularly from the perspective of Africa's catching up with the world and why Africa is still dependent on developed countries and developed world, look at it from these two perspectives, the historical standpoint and the gap standpoint.
Now, based on what you said, let me ask you this. Now, will you if I say let's pinpoint this problem exactly, will you pinpoint it as a person problem, saying we don't have a capacity of people is not really being focused towards development in the angle it should? Will you call it a government problem, that we don't have systems and structures to be able to enable this creativity, or what problem will you call it? What if we were to pinpoint it?
So if I should look at it, I try to contextualize the whole dimension of why this is happening in Africa. I'll look at it like these areas you've pinpointed are important, but it's necessary to pinpoint it, like let us build it from the bottom top. That is from the people first. Let's start that. There is that interest because obviously from 2000, because when you're looking at the historical standpoint again, there are two timelines that actually change the trajectory of Africa's intersection in the global space in terms of information computation technology, in terms of improvement. First is from 2000 and the second one is from 2010. From 2001, what it did was that it provided the opportunity for Africa connectivity with global communication supply chain brand. So that means mobile technology, whereby a lot of African countries and a lot of even Nigeria has its own story, whereby we now got that intersection with it. So from that point in time, that interest amongst everyone became increased to a large extent.
True.
Whereby you see small kids sitting down like, I want to know what's happening on the internet, how people spend their time overnight browsing, right? Spending a lot of time trying to find out what's happening on the internet, Google Message, Yahoo Messenger, and all those things.
Yeah.
So those were, it plucked Nigeria's interest. And from there, you now start having that interest, and that interest has continued. So from then from 2000 period, whereby the rise of computer science, artificial intelligence, and other things that actually push forward that interest more. So from that area, the interest is already there, and with the interest always comes the need for skill. So a lot of Africans themselves have now developed that interest to start looking for how they would be able to learn more for what's happening in the global space. And or I'll say, fortunately, the Western world provides that opportunity for learning these things. And that's one side. The second aspect of it, which is important too, is the government. So there is that need for that commitment towards directing technological innovations, towards like having that be at par, interest as well as government commitment at par. So I'll look at it from the education standpoint and start asking yourself, how the curriculum around training Africans, young, upcoming, and even at university level, what's the curriculum like? I've had conversations with people that study computer science in school, and to a large extent, they'll tell you that whatever they learned outside of the four walls of education is more interesting and more hands-on than what's in the curriculum. In fact, most times the curriculum aspect provides it to a point that they can't be able to get enough experience and compete with other parts of the world. So that already creates problematic structures in terms of how Africa is going to relate with this. So that's why I see it that on the government side, there's a lot of work to be done. This is just me speaking one aspect of curriculum. There's on the government side, there's work to be done. On the interest side too, there's need to support what's going on now. A lot of the number of equipment coming into Africa, developing countries like Africa, is on the high side. A lot of interest connected to the internet, courses. A lot of people are interested in these things. So once you link these things well, you can now start pinpointing problems and start providing solutions within that dimension to assist and ensure that Africa not just only play catch up with what's happening in the global world, but also try as much as possible to compete favorably with the trend globally.
And I really like what you said. You said the interest is there, but we have to match up interest with the requisite skill. I really like that part, and that's where the government really needs to do more, because if you can create certain structures where people can channel their interest through, because if you look at most of these accomplishments, great things are happening globally, Nigerians are always involved. Africans, you see a lot of Africans on the theme of this AI, this one, they're doing great things. Why? These people have the interest, but these countries were able to create systems where they could nurture this interest.
Can I add something
yes,
there
please.
that's very important? It interests you to know that as a result of the drive and this interest for technological advancement in Africa and developing countries, the number of technology hubs in Africa alone is skyrocketing.
Amazing.
It's going almost to it's competing right now. There's technological incubation sessions, incubator groups that tries to help these to work on the interest, leverage the interest that a lot of Africans have, a lot of Africans and Nigerians have, to be able to compete with the developing world. But the challenge, like we already said here, is that supporting commensurate interest with requirements, infrastructure, and also the interest on the government. Now you have, and this is not me bashing government institutions, but more like from the perspective of, if you know that this is important to you, you develop a lot of time, a lot of interest into it. It's nice for what the previous ministers and other minister for technology, information computer technology in Nigeria is doing, but there is room for more. Rather than doing constituency projects whereby you are sharing grinding machine, other things, why don't you train them?
Good.
Provide that platform, provide that partnership. So instead of palliatives and other projects should focus purely on what they can hand out to you, rather give you necessary skills. And when I'm talking about skills, I'm not talking about just typing on computer. I'm not talking about just opening an email. I'm talking about
coding,
those
all of these
hands-on
things.
skills that you can compete. And this is not just for informal area. Even in the formal sections, what is the architecture around people learning soft computer skills as well as other technical expertise that they are learning? So there is need to have these things go simultaneously.
Great.
So while you're having the interest, you're having government support, and then this with in time we might be able to solve this problem.
Great.
And also improve the gap between Africa.
Good. So let's dive right into it. Let's take actionable strategies. You started mentioning a few of them. And let's hit the points now. How can we change this? How can we change Africa and Nigeria in the long run from depending solely on the Western world for their technological solutions? How can we bring it here and in the long run even change it that the Western world is depending on us for these solutions? How?
So the first point of solving the how is, let's look at the potential.
Okay.
Africa, as a developing continent, has the potential by 2050 to have the youngest population in the world.
Great.
And innovation technology goes with youth.
True.
And for the fact that Africa has that, you have something already as a potential there. So there is now need to start strategies to bring these youths to be at par with what's happening in the world. That's first. Now, beyond that, when you now start looking at it away from potential and look at actionable strategies, it's more like targeted interventions, support. Not just support in terms of technical, like taking them to schools or trying as much as possible, but also with regards to support in terms of infrastructure. Technology is something that is infrastructure driven, and while it's infrastructure driven, it's also finance and capital intensive.
Sure.
So there's that need not just to focus purely on government, but try to look at private partnerships. Look at how there would be a proper linkage between private partnerships, between gaps in terms of skills, gaps in terms of infrastructure, gaps in terms of manpower. So even if you are having, for example, a gap in maybe a sector, and then you have a technical expertise coming from outside the country to train someone, there should be a monitoring system in place to ensure that period, that skill is also transferred to one person, and from one person to another person, and another person to another person. Lastly, is to look at this innovations hub I talked about.
Okay.
While there are a lot of them in place, there is need to integrate how to support this innovations hub. There are so many of them in Nigeria, so many of them in developing countries that are doing so well.
Sure.
I read about one in Cameroon that what they do actually is to look at readings in terms of weather and try as much as possible to look at plants and look at the challenges of plants and then develop a strategy in terms of improving the plant yield.
Amazing.
In Cameroon. And there are so
Amazing.
many of them in different parts of Africa. But now it's about that support. You might not always get the Microsoft, might not always get the Google to support them. But then what are other strategies to support these hubs? These hubs are the key to unlocking the untapped potentials around Africa's innovation and Africa's catching up with what's happening in the world. Lastly, and this is very, very passionate to me, is integrating education to it.
Beautiful.
How do we try as much as possible to integrate our educational systems to what's going on in the world? There are a lot of, you see kids, I was watching some of our kids in China learning to code at the age of 5, at the age of 3.
That's
Meanwhile, kids in developing countries like Africa are more interested in reading nursery rhymes.
Exactly.
But whereby they have the potential, because at that stage, once you teach them something, they learn that.
Sticks to them.
So these are a lot of strategies, actionable strategies that can take. And then last but not the least is we have to continue to find the embers of interest. That interest needs to be there so that we can always push this thing out there and then ensure that we are at par with the developed world or the globalized world.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Doctor. We have education is very important. I picked that point. We have to prepare our children, prepare the youths for the future, not for the past. We have to prepare them for the future. Thank you so much, Doctor. And say we'll come to you next time. We'll continue. But before we go, Doctor, one final word from you, not a word, one final sentence from you. Innovation, technology, African youth. Tell us something that we run with.
I'll end with this. You cannot drive innovation if you are not interested in it, and you cannot be interested in innovation if the government doesn't provide what you need to be interested in it.
Dr. Augustine 2024. See you next time. Thank you.